Okay, this is my book talk. Book talk made me do it, and I am mostly grateful. This is part 2 of my book talk recommendations video, so if you haven't seen part 1 yet, you might want to start there. I don't know. Call me in a couple weeks because I will let you know. And that's the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I'm going to let you know that I adored the first book and the second book. I give the second book 5 stars. Nothing happens in the second book. They just like ride around and banter. These books aren't, they're a little bit of a mess, okay? But they're my mess. I love them. They're about this girl named Poppy who is the maiden. What is the maiden? You don't need to know. We don't know. I am 3 books into this series, plus a spin-off book. I have not read the newest one that has just come out, and I still don't know really what the maiden is. Very confused by it. Maybe someone will eventually tell me. But she's the maiden, and then what essentially, practically that means is that she has to wear a veil all the time, and she's like not allowed to talk to anyone, and she's like very like cloistered away. Okay, and then in comes Hawk. Hawk is her new guard. They had like a torrid little like she snuck out and he like made out with her at this like bar in town. And then he becomes her guard and like, oh no, he's gonna discover that she's been sneaking out, and obviously romance ensues. And then like the plot spirals from there and it gets kind of unhinged. And like I said, I haven't read the newest release, the 4th book, The War of Two Queens, but I have not heard great things. People are angry. Anyway, I only have one suggestion for this. It's kind of, again, a weird one. And that's the selection by Kira Cass. And on paper, you might say, Nichelle, these have nothing in common. And because the selection, if you don't know, is a YA, very clean, nice YA series about The Bachelor, but it's for princesses and princes. And From Blood and Ash is a very spicy, this is a very adult book. There's like heck of vampires, there's like 14 different types, there's like mad pantheon of gods and like all sorts of nonsense. But the first book, From Blood and Ash, just the first book, and the selection have the exact same vibes. I reread the selection series over like quarantine because, you know, needed some dopamine and that seemed lovely. And then I read From Blood and Ash like pretty shortly after and I was like, oh, these books are literally identical in like spirit and vibes. So I would recommend, if you are just like looking for something like really gonna give you that dopamine hit real quick in your head, Kira Cass is the selection. Is it gonna win a Pulitzer? No, but like that's what we're here for sometimes, you know. Switching gears entirely, we have A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book is emotionally devastating. Saddest book on the internet. I love it with all my heart, but it is traumatic. And if you do want to read this book, you should do some research before you go into it because it will shred your insights. It took me actual months to recover from this book. Like, months. I read it in May and I really don't think I was like fully recovered emotionally until like the summer was over. But truly one of the best Britain books I've ever read in my entire life. A Little Life, if you aren't familiar, is about this man named Jude who's had literally the worst childhood you could possibly fathom. And it's about him, it starts when he's about 30, and it is about him kind of dealing with the trauma from his past, and it's also about the people around him and the people that love him, and what it feels like to watch someone struggle so severely with essentially like complex PTSD and slowly unravel. So, if that sounds great, you should tune to A Little Life. No, seriously, it is like a brilliantly written, beautiful book, but it is very, very heavy. I have some options for you. First one is The Great Believers. Oh shoot, I don't have the author. I will make sure it's up there. But this is like A Little Life light. It deals with kind of a similar setup, although this one takes place in 1980s Chicago rather than kind of like modern day New York. But it is about this man named Yale who is I think he works at like major gifts for a university in Chicago. But he is a gay man and it's during like kind of the height of the AIDS epidemic. So it's about the people around him like dying. And how he's kind of dealing with that. And at the same time, we're also getting a story about this woman whose daughter, I think, is in a cult in Paris. Or maybe he's just run away to Paris. I don't remember there being a cult, but then I do remember there being a cult. Unclear. A little bit lighter than A Little Life, but still nice and heavy. Most things are lighter than A Little Life. In fact, I can't think of anything heavier than A Little Life. And the other option I have is The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. This is a much lighter option, but it does kind of have a similar kind of expansive narrative where it follows multiple characters all centered around this girl. It starts with this girl going to this talk by this like notorious feminist woman in college. She was like dragged there by her roommate, and how it kind of changes her life. And so we follow her roommate, we follow her college boyfriend, and we follow the woman who came and gave the speech. And so we follow them for the next, like, I think decade, maybe even a little bit more, as she's kind of getting her footing into adulthood and as are the people around her. And then this woman is towards the tail end of her career and is trying to figure out like what next steps look like. It's really beautiful, a nice like sweeping story of a community that won't like leave you crying on the cold hard ground, you know. Next up, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I love Addie LaRue. Addie LaRue is a story of this, I think it's 14th century. It might be a little later. I don't know. She's this woman in France, and she doesn't want to get married because it sounds like a bad time. And so she makes a deal with essentially like a devil. And he grants her the ability to live forever, but no one will remember her. So as soon as she's out of the line of sight of a person, or it's like the next morning, they forget about her. And so she has lived centuries at this point and has lived like crazy amounts of life. And it's kind of about those lives that she's lived over the past centuries and also in the modern day, like what she's doing now. It's really good. It's really beautiful. It is kind of about like the beauty and joy and goodness of like our world and being alive, even despite kind of ugliness, but also kind of about the importance of connection and community. It's really beautifully written too. Loved it. Some people find it kind of slow. It's not like a super fast-paced book, but it is a delight. And I have 2 recommendations for this one as well. The first one is like a favorite that I like wish more people would read because I think it is just like truly stunning. It's one of my favorite books. And This Is How We Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mutar and Max Gladstone. This book is stunningly written. So it is about 2 agents in a time war, red and blue. What is a time war? I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I didn't totally understand the plot of this book. So I couldn't tell you what a time war is. Again, confused. That's not what we're here for. They start to exchange letters and they start to fall in love. And when I tell you those letters are just like some of my favorite writing of all time, I'm not lying. They're gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I love them. And then the other one with, again, stunning writing is a little guy. It's called Bluets, and it is prose poetry. So it is like paragraphs, but it's like poetic paragraphs. It's essentially this woman's exploration of grief through kind of musings in the color blue. It is a very like fast read, but it's delightful. You'll love it if you love Addie LaRue. It doesn't have any plot, so if you're looking for plot, don't look here. Another Coho, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is another one of her super popular books. This one is also not a romance. I would say this one is like a women's fiction, contemporary sort of thing with a romance arc in it. But romance has to have a happy ending. And the ending on this is debatable. Okay. Spoiler. Essentially, this is about a woman who, I'm going to spoil this book a little bit, but I think you should know it going in, who winds up in a situation where she experiences some domestic violence, and it is about her kind of coping with that. It's gorgeous. It is a very good read, and Colleen Hoover has like a very personal connection to the story. You should definitely read the author's note at the end. It kind of talks more in detail about like why Colleen wrote this book. I have a couple recommendations. One, if you were looking to kind of stay on this theme of like domestic violence, I think there is no better book that I have read than In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is actually Carmen Maria Machado's memoir of her time in an abusive relationship. And it is stunningly written. Like, I truly think this should be required reading for every single human person on this planet. Required reading. So she talks about her time in this relationship, but she does it in these little vignettes that she uses different kind of literary tools and genres to form. So it'll be like Dream House as word problem, Dream House as Choose Your Own Adventure, Dream House as gothic romance. And she'll write like, you know, sometimes it's just a paragraph, sometimes it's a few pages of an experience that she had while she was in this relationship, but kind of using that trope or tool or genre to structure the writing. And it is just like, am blown away that someone's head could come up with that. Like, she is truly stunning and brilliant, and this book is like everything. Obsessed with it. And not on the same theme, but kind of has that like readability of a Colleen Hoover novel. I read Dolly Alderton's Ghost earlier this year, and it is so good. It's about this woman in London who has just turned 31 and has just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and it's about her experience getting back into the dating world, and it is so good. It feels like this like intimate portrait of this woman. You feel like you know her very personally, but it also feels like very real. I truly adored it. Would recommend 100%. Very different tonally, but like readability level, similar. You'll just have to trust me. Okay, this next one I read and I actually like, didn't love. But I think to each their own. When it comes to like literary fiction, I think we can all like look at something and agree like there's merit, or most people can agree and be like, okay, The Vanishing Half. This book is beautifully written. It talks about something that's very important. Everyone can agree this is a great book. When it comes to what I lovingly call trash can books, trash books, garbage books, otherwise known as like guilty pleasures, they're like very personal. And I don't think there should be any tea, no shade. I love From Blood and Ash. I didn't love Crave. Crave is about this girl who winds up whose parents die. Both her parents dead in a car accident. So she gets sent to her uncle's, who runs a boarding school for magical creatures. Do they tell her there's magic? No, everyone there can do magic. They think they're going to be able to keep it from her. Confusing to me. There's like vampires, there's witches, there's werewolves, there's wolf shifters, there's dragons, there's gargoyles, there's 20,000 different creatures at this school, and it is like the cheesiest thing that I've ever read in my entire life. I believe that if you were to feed an AI robot all of the like 2008 books that I'm recommending, you fed it Selection, you fed it Twilight, you gave it Hush Hush, you gave it, what was that one series? Like The Beautiful Creatures? Fallen. We were really into vampires in the day. Back in my day. And asked it to create a YA novel, this is probably what it would create. Anyway, if this is your type of trash, I'm not trying to yuck your yums. Go off. And I do have some suggestions for you. The first is Hush Hush. Hush Hush, like I said, this gives me like very much 2008's YA literature. And this, Hush Hush, is the creme de la creme. It is about a fallen angel named Patch, who I believe lives under a carnival, amusement park situation. That could be a lie, but I think in order to get up to where the angels live, I think they have to ride really fast on a roller coaster. I'm basing this entirely on my memories that I have of this book from when I read it when I was 16, but I do remember it was excellent. And I think it'll give you that good, bad vibes, Like, it's so bad that it's good. Hush Hush. Another one from that same time period is Marked, the House of Night books. I think that's what they were called, by PC Cast. I only read the first couple. Someone was talking about them on TikTok the other day, and I guess they get like wild towards the end. I don't remember that. I just read the first couple. It's about the school for vampires. And when you become a vampire, you find out you're a vampire, you get a mark on your forehead, I think. You like grow tattoos. Again, don't remember the details. Remember it was a good time. And I think if you were here for Crave, I think you'll be here for this one too. So I'm telling you. Okay, next we have Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuinston. It is about the president's son and the Prince of England, and they have a cute little romance. And it's delightful. It's just a good time. And I have two recommendations for this one. The first one is The Idea of You by Robin Lee. This book is so good. The premise sounds so trashy, and it is a little. But I also think it brings up some really interesting conversations around how we treat things that teen girls really enjoy and how we kind of like look down upon them, and also like motherhood and how like the loss of self, and it's so good. Anyway, the premise is this mom, who's like a pretty young, cool mom, takes her daughter to an essentially a One Direction concert. This whole book is a One Direction knockoff, okay? And they get invited backstage where she meets a discount Harry Styles. And by discount, I just mean that he's in this book. He's actually excellent. 10 out of 10. She meets this version of Harry Styles. It's Harry Styles. I don't remember his name in the book because in my head he is Harry Styles. And they start a romance. This mom has a romance with this he's like 20. It's very Olivia Wilde, Harry Styles. Did Robin Lee see it first? Maybe. It's a good time. It's a good bad time. It's a good bad time. Yeah. My other suggestion is the Royal We by, I can't remember. I think this is by two people. This is Will and Kate fanfiction. We're just giving you fanfiction recommendations. That's not what it is. It is like a novel, but it's about this girl who does her study abroad in Oxford, and then guess what? The Prince of England is also studying there, and they fall in love. And it's about her being in love with the Prince of England. It takes place over the course of like years and years, but it's very Kate Middleton, Prince William. It's a delight. There's a sequel too, and I love the sequel even more than the first one. So if you're in the mood for the royals, the Royal We, if you were in the mood for like a romance that has like some brain behind it, The Idea of You by Robin Lee. Okay, we've only got a couple left. And first up, we have the queen herself of TikTok. That's right, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I see this book more than any other book on TikTok. People are obsessed with it. It is the twilight of this moment. And if you don't know, The Court of Thorns and Roses is this book about fairies. About the fae. Is there a difference between fae and fairies? I don't know. I grew up in the age of vampires. But, so this girl named Feyre, who accidentally she kills the wolf on purpose, but she didn't know he was a fairy. And so then this guy named Tamlin shows up and is like, you have to come live with me because you killed a wolf that was actually a fairy. And she's like, okay. And so she winds up being taken into the Feylands and is living with Tamlin. And, things spiral from there. And, I do have some recommendations. It's one of those series where, like, you really have to be, like, quite particular about it because it's so hard to find a fantasy romance that, like, hits the spot in the way that the later Court of Thorns and Roses books do. The first one is, like, kind of iffy. But books 2 and 3, I actually didn't love book 2 the first time I read it because of a reason I can't get into because of spoilers, but it was just me being dumb. When I reread the books, I loved it. Anyway, my first recommendation is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. These books are excellent. They are about Diana and Matthew. Diana is a witch. Matthew is a vampire. Diana is like a super powerful witch. She accidentally pulls this book called Ashimole. 78353? I don't remember the number. It's a super magic book out of the library at Oxford. She's obviously a historian. Matthew is a biologist. These are academics. And they like have, a legal love affair because witches and vampires can't love each other. But they fall like deeply, deeply, madly in love and then go on adventures, which is what we're looking for. But Matthew has the same vibes as Rhysand. Like they have very similar vibes. Rhysand, Edward Cullen, Matthew de Claremont all have the same vibe, which means that they could be played by Henry Cavill in my head. I have cast like every... Castile is in that from Blood and Ashes, also in that lineup. I have cast in my head Henry Cavill as every like male fantasy romance lead since Stephanie Meyer fan casted him. Is it called fan casting if you're the author? I don't know. She said a young Henry Cavill looks like Edward Cullen, and in my head, that was when my brain was still Play-Doh-y and mushy, and that part formed right up, and it formed up around Henry Cavill. So I do picture him as literally all the men. People are like, oh, he should play Cassian in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. And I was like, he should play Cassian, maybe Azriel, also Rhysand. He should play Rowan. He should play Castile. He should play literally everyone. Anyway, side note about Henry Cavill. My other suggestion, if you love A Court of Thorns and Roses, and you're going to maybe laugh at me, because this is a book that came out before I was born. And I am not young anymore. I'm 28. And this first book came out before I was alive. And that is Outlander. Outlander, if you haven't heard of it, there's a television show. But the book is also excellent. The first 2 books are great. The third book, I can't remember if it's the first 2 or 3. The first 2 when they're in Europe. Excellent. Yeah, it's the first 2. First 2 are excellent. The third one is fine. The fourth one is boring. That's all I've read so far. I'm going to get into the rest of them. But they're like 18,000 pages long, and they do take me like a long time to read. So I don't like to read them back to back. But anyway, Outlander is about this girl named Claire who travels back in time through these magic stones and meets this Outlander named Jamie. And she has to marry him for, complicated reasons. And then they fall in love. And Jamie is the best book boy. I will be taking no arguments, no complaints, no questions. Jamie is the best book boy. Edward Cullen? No. Rhysand? No. Castile? No. Love them all. Jamie's better than all of them. He's the best. And if that's what you're looking for, you need to read Outlander. There's like very little magic, just, you know, a little bit of time travel. And then it's historical fiction, but like really we're here for the romance. And Jamie is just top tier. Just top tier. And somehow she is able to write these books where even after they've fallen in love, because like a lot of times I think the angst is always good, but then once they're like in love, you're like, okay, boring. I feel like Diane Garibaldi, whoever wrote these books, does such a beautiful job of keeping Jamie and Claire's relationship interesting even after they're like deeply, deeply in love. You know? And I think that's tricky. It's tricky to do. I think she does it. Okay. Our last one is another like personal favorite. And it's Beach Read by Emily Henry. As you know, I love Emily Henry. We have Beach Read is actually, she's back there. Don't worry. Beach Read is the story of January and Augustus. They're both writers. January is a romance writer. Augustus is a literary fiction writer. They knew each other in college, but they were kind of like not close. They weren't like friends, although they had like a few exchanges. Anyway, they wind up living next door to each other on a lake house. January is dealing with the recent death of her father. Gus is dealing with like a fairly recent divorce. And so they're both kind of like coping, working through those things while also falling in love with each other. And it is just, it's top notch. It's top notch. But I have 2 recommendations. The first one is 7 Days in June. These are like very similar stories. This one is also about 2 authors, but instead of being like more of an enemies to lovers, although like Gus and January never really enemies, but you know, disliked 2 lovers. This is like second chance romance. They were in love as teens. They spent these like 7 days together in June, hence the name. And they like fell in love when they were teens. But then something happened and they lost touch. But then they meet up again as adults. And like, obviously they fall back in love. But the things this man says, Shane, the writer man, says to our heroine, whose name I can't remember. I would die. He's got some good lines. Good lines. Very similar vibes and also just like super, super good. And the other one is by Emily Henry. I'm recommending her own book based on her book. But this book no one talks about and it's so good and you should read it. If you love Beach Read, you need to read Hello Girls. This is a YA book, but it is a contemporary YA. It doesn't have any fantasy in it, which most of her YA does. And it is about, she also co-wrote it with Brittany Cavallaro, who is also a brilliant YA writer. But this book is about 2 best friends who are like 17. They both come from terrible home situations. Both very different home situations, but both terrible. So they decide to run away together, but they're 17. They don't have a lot of funds. So they need to do some light crimes. And this book is just like a stunning look at female friendship, especially the kind of like close friendship that you get with like your high school and college friends. There's something that's like particularly like special about these women that you like really spend a ton of time with and really grow up with. They think Emily Henry and Brittany Cavallaro capture so well in Hello Girls, and it's just like so good. And I have heard like literally no one talk about it. It is brilliant. Everyone should go immediately purchase Hello Girls. It is like a pretty short little book, but it is a delight. A delight. Subscribe if you want more videos about my book recommendations. Let me know if you have any particular kind of recommendation requests, whether that's for a specific book or for like a genre. Like I said, I read pretty diversely, so I feel like I'm a good recommender because I read a lot and I read a lot of different stuff. So I feel like I'm a good recommender. Anyway, so if you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments down below. Subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you later. Bye!